Third time doing this video because the display driver keeps on crashing. Man. So I'm back after a little, well I won't say a little, a video game hiatus of Destiny that completely took over my life because I have an addictive personality. It is a weakness that I'm trying to work on. Oh, this is actually something else. So let's move on to the shit. So where I left off with was the shortest path. And so calculates that shortest path. Now, the reason I do this is because right now I have a connection between every Verneuil cell. So if Verneuil piece is touching its neighbor, it basically builds a connection there, as you saw in the previous videos. Now, I only want one connection. I only want one connection per piece. And shortest path does that for me. But it doesn't do it perfectly. As you can see, it connects them all up. Now, the only thing I want is the end primitive here. Oh, that is one primitive. I just want to carve it down to that, but I want to carve it down on a certain length. So attribute wrangle comes in and does the work for me, and what I do is I basically go through every primitive that you just saw, and I go through every vertex except the last two and get their point numbers and then remove them. And as you can see, I will hook this up to the blast. There it is. There's primitive 5 that we just saw, so it's cut down to that last primitive. Now the network looks the same, but that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. We need to transfer the name attribute back on to those points so they know which parent they belong to, and that's very easy to do. We just bring in the pack primitives and we do a closest point because these are actually the point centroids, so it's very easy to transfer there. The next thing I got to do is I got to set up these two attributes, the parent name and the parent position. For every primitive here, there's basically a parent, which is going to be closest to the start point, and a child, which is furthest away. And so we need to figure this out. So the child needs to know the parent position because that's what we're going to grow out of. We're going to grow this child from the parent. And we're going to do that successively all the way down. So this child grows out of this parent. So as you can see on the, I'll just skip to the final video here. You can see it's growing out like that. And so it'll only start growing until the parent is in position. So I'm going to rename this for the third freaking time. And so what we do here is we go through, so here is, I just selected, basically I have a primitive there. And I'm going to select actually that primitive right there. And so I go through each one of these primitives. And I determine, I basically set, because the closest point is basically vertex 0, the furthest away point is going to be the highest vertex, the furthest away vertex. So basically, I can basically say the furthest one, look at the closest one, and give me your name and position. And that's what I stick on this point on the end there. So the child knows where the parent is on a point basis. The next thing I got to do is I got to sort these. And the problem with that, the reason why I have to do that is we're going to go to a better example here. Is let me find a branch that splits. Oh, here's a great one right there. I have maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points there. I only need one. There's 5 points there that all are talking or all have the same name, which can communicate back to the Verneuil pieces through the name. So I need the one that's attached to this guy. So of these 5 points, which one is attached to this guy? And I got to do that over all of them. So what I do is these have the point cost attribute. You can see how it's doing the gradient black to white. So the ones further away have a higher cost. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to promote the smallest the smallest cost value onto the primitive. And then what I'm going to do is so that's the minimum, and then I'm going to take that primitive, now that it's been minimized, and I'm going to put it back on the points. So these points know, these points, all 5 of them, know the smallest attribute. So how do I sort through them? And I do that right here. So I go through all these points, for every point. I go through and then I find their name. And then what I do is I get the name count. So how many points are identical to me, pretty much? Like how many common neighbors, not neighbors, but copies do I have of this point? So what I do about that is I can filter by the cost attribute. And so what I do is I go through all the points, find the name, and then what I do is I basically compute the smallest, I filter for the smallest cost. So I go through all the after I go through all the points, I go through the matching points by name, get the cost, and then I basically filter it. And then I tag the smallest ID. So the one with the smallest point, so I set tag here to 1, it goes to 0. It gets, basically I tag everything and then I untag. And then I remove them. So now I'm left with 1 point here. And that's pretty much the case. And so what I can do here, this is probably going to crash, and I'm going to be pissed if it does. So right here, we're going to see this blend happen. So this is basically the ability for these points to basically move. And there goes the crash. I do not know why. But it's just a display crash. It's very upsetting, but that's basically how you basically move the points. So I'm going to leave it at that. Damn driver keeps crashing, and then we'll go into the DOP sim.